Hi, everybody. I'm Roy Firestone, and welcome to our brand new interview show on cane sport. We will be interviewing the greatest legends in Miami sports history, and in this case, we're football heavy. So to start our series, we welcome this guy right here, maybe the most decorated coach in Miami sports history, including Don Shula, by the way. His book, Swagger, comes out in November, and it's co-written by Dave Hyde. Jimmy Johnson coached one national title with the Canes. It might have been one or two more. We'll talk about that in a little bit. He then went to the Dallas Cowboys, of course, and led them to 2 Super Bowl titles after a disastrous 1-15 start. So we welcome my old friend and Fox pre- and post-game show anchor, the great Coach Jimmy Johnson. Coach, it's great to see you, man. It's been a few years. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Roy. Good to see you.
We're going to have some fun today because we're going to talk about stuff all the years. We must have done about 5 or 6 full interviews for ESPN, but I've never had a chance to talk about the entire life of Jimmy Johnson. And I want to start with a photo of you as a little boy in Port Arthur. Tell me about this kid. Tell me about his dreams.
Oh, it was just day to day. Go out and play and be involved in sports. My dad was manager of a baseball team, and my brother played baseball, and so I was always active, involved in sports, but really didn't have a care in the world. I came from a great family, a loving mother and father, and a brother and sister, so I was very fortunate to come from a good family.
We're going to talk about your folks a little bit later in the show because there's some emotion that we'll talk about with you. But I want to talk about you in high school. Here you are. I think this is a high school shot. Look at that crew cut. What year is this? About 1958? What would you say, 59?
Oh, let's see. That probably was about 58, 59. I was missing a tooth right there. I was playing football. My high school coach was Buckshot Underwood.
What? What was his name?
Buckshot Underwood.
Really?
He was an outstanding high school coach. He had worked for Bear Bryant at Kentucky. So he was a tough son of a gun. And so anyway, I was out there, playing the game.
By the way, we have a picture of you in uniform for the Yellow Jackets. Maybe
yeah,
this is, there it is.
Well, you can't see that my tooth's missing, but I knocked my tooth out and I held up my tooth. I said, Coach Underwood, I knocked out my tooth. He said, that's okay. Keep playing. We'll buy you another one.
Hey, tell everybody who this person is for those who don't know.
Janice Joplin. That's old Beat Weeds. She lived about 2 blocks from me.
Let me repeat that for those who didn't hear him. That's Janice Joplin, folks, the great Janice Joplin. And you called her Beat Weeds?
Yeah, I gave her a nickname. Actually, she was the reason I said beat because she wore the black leotards, and she went over and she was singing over in Louisiana, and she smoked marijuana back then, and which all the football players, we were just, she's smoking marijuana, and so we called her Beat Weeds. And her sister called me back a few years ago. She was doing a book, and she said, hey, I heard you kind of bullied her, and I said, no, I didn't bully her. We had a really good relationship. We went back and forth. She kidded me about being a jock, and, I kidded her about being a beatnik, and so we had a good relationship. Now, she did ask if I'd been improper with her. And she said, that was the rumor. I said, no, I didn't touch her. Now,
maybe you didn't want to touch her. Let's be honest.
Well, no, I told her, I told the sister, I said, our fullback did, but I didn't.
Hey, I want to ask you, you're a very evolved guy, Jimmy, at this point in your life. You're very reflective. I think you're a different guy. I always liked you, but I think I would even like you more now because of all the things you've been through. If she were alive, what would you say to Janice Joplin?
I would just tell her congratulations, because I didn't realize she was as good as what she was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, when I went off to school at University of Arkansas, a friend of mine at University of Texas called me and said, man, old Beat Weeds is just tearing it up with holding company or whatever it was.
Yeah, big brother in the holding company.
Yeah, Janice was the hottest thing going. My buddy at Texas said, hey, she's really, a great singer. I didn't even realize it at the time.
Now, did you ever get a chance to ever see her again after high school?
No, no, she went back for a reunion years later. I wasn't at it. And but she talked about how everybody had really given her a hard time back in Port Arthur. But she was striking out against everybody during that stage of her life.
I had heard this story. I don't know if this is just someone's pulling my leg, that the reason you had that Jimmy Johnson hairdo was you had scars in your head and you wanted to cover it with hair. Is that true?
Well, and one of my nicknames was Scarhead. We used to play football out in the boulevard. When I was 8, 9 years old, we had half a dozen black players, and Baby Joe and I, a couple of friends of mine. We all played. We played tackle football, and my brother was bigger than the rest of us, and he would slam me down and throw me into the street. I'd get a cut here and a cut there. And so it was a violent sport. And then we pretended that we were wrestlers. I was always, he was Bull Curry. He was the mean guy. And I was, I don't know, one of those guys that could ballet and dance and all that stuff. Well, he would throw me down. He threw me down one time, hit my head on a can. So I've got scars all over my head.
So truth be told, that's why you have the Jimmy Johnson hair.
That's why I've got long hair now to cover up all the scars.
You mentioned something about playing, street ball with some of the black kids, but it was not an integrated time in Port Arthur. And you really evolved. In fact, I read in your first book, Turning the Thing Around, that you said you never had a problem with black kids. You never had a problem with Jewish people. You love all kinds of people. But in those times, there was racism, a lot of racism. How did you become evolved, Jimmy?
Roy, I actually, during that period of time, it was kind of the way my mother and daddy raised me. We were all the same. And I know people will hear this and they say, no, that's not right. But really, I didn't see color. I mean, we were buddies. That's who I hung around, and so I didn't even realize some of the things that were going on until I got into school, and then I'd hear some of the comments, and I'd say, "Hey, that's not right," and so I was offended at an early age at what some people said about some of my friends, but I think that helped me out later on as I started coaching with, black players and black coaches and coaching black players. I mean, I always had a great relationship that way.
We have a clip of you the first day they announced you were going to be coach at Miami. And of course, they're coming off of Schnellenberger. They win the national title and everyone's going, Jimmy, who? What the hell is this? Well, roll this now. I heard the story that you were disappointed that you couldn't name your own staff, and it really broke your heart. And you had to go with the olds. Nothing against the other coaches, but it really set you back. Is that true?
Yeah, that was one of the stipulations for me taking the job at Miami, and it caused problems in that it was kind of a sell job to me that hey, they're an outstanding staff, they're good coaches, and I was told as I got off the tarmac, from the plane, I'd never been to Coral Gables before. I was going into a meeting with my staff that I'd never met a single one of them.
Wow.
And after that meeting, I was going to the press conference to announce that I was going to be the head coach at Miami. Little did I know, 3 of those coaches had really lobbied hard to be the head coach. And they were told 15 minutes before I walked in the room, they didn't get the job. I did. This guy from Oklahoma got the job.
That's unbelievable.
The other thing that they were told that if they didn't like me and they didn't want to work for me, they would still be paid, but they didn't have to work that year. And one of the coaches opted out that way. He said, I don't want to work for him. Just pay me off for this year. So it was really a strained relationship the entire year until I was able to straighten things out after that season and bring in my own people.
One of the quotes that I loved from the first book, it was pretty honest about yourself, was this. You said, I'm not a bad man, but I am a selfish man. I'm a generous man too. But the greatest misconception is that I'm an unfeeling man. You want to reflect on that?
Well, I'm a selfish man in that I want a lot of good things. I want a lot of good things for all of us. I want a lot of good things for me, my wife, my family. I'm selfish in that way. And, you know, sometimes when you're a head football coach or head of an organization, head of a CEO, you can't have feelings. At least you can't show your feelings. You can't let your guard down and let people take advantage of you and take advantage of your position. Mm-hmm. So I'm a different guy now, you know, that I'm not coaching. You know, players and people that knew me back then, you know, they said, "Boy, you were a mean, tough son of a gun." And Roy, you probably know that. I mean, it was all business. You know, it was, hey, I've got a job to do. Mm-hmm. But now that I'm not coaching, hey, I'm having fun with people.
You know, the name of your book is this book here, coming out in November, is Swagger. And you talked to those kids. And by the way, very recently, you talked to the incoming players. It may have been this year or last year, I don't remember. And you tried to define swagger. I want you to watch this clip and we'll reflect on it.
It's called something that started right here in Miami. Swagger. And people get confused about swagger. Sometimes they look about the old Miami teams and they said swagger was celebrating. No. Swagger was confidence. You're confident that you're going to kick somebody's ass.
I'm going to play devil's advocate just for a second.
Okay.
I don't agree with what I'm about to say, but I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Okay.
Too harsh, crude, unnecessarily nasty. Jimmy Johnson should have scaled it back. And by the way, we'll talk about Tad Foote a little bit later in this interview. Everyone was at the time was saying, this guy is too crude. He's just a redneck guy from Oklahoma State. You know, what do you say to people say, why do you have to talk like that to these kids?
Well, you know, I wanted our players, you know, most of our players, you know, inner city kids, a lot of them, a lot of our stars were inner city kids. And I wanted them to have the freedom to be themselves. Mm-hmm. Now, we were not a penalized team. You know, we were one of the least penalized teams in the country. Now, after I left, it got out of hand and they had a bunch of penalties. But if you check out our stats, you know, we were not a penalized team. So I wouldn't allow, you know, unnecessary penalties. I wouldn't allow taunting. Now, we would celebrate and we would talk a little trash, but not to intimidate the opponent. Now, our celebration would intimidate the opponent. And I wanted to intimidate the opponent. Mm-hmm.
Billy Corgan, who directed The U, you saw that, you're in that, University of Miami, The Story of the Canes on ESPN many years ago. I think it was 2009. He played a clip for us, and we're going to run it again. You said that your players didn't want to intimidate on the field, the celebration. They had a different view. I want you to watch this. We'll talk about it. Watch.
One of the reasons why they don't have the microphones anymore.
Winston Moss had the coin toss, him, Jerome, and Alonzo.
And the coin toss was on national television.
They refused to shake hands.
I distinctly remember the officials threatening to throw a flag on us if we did not shake your opponent's hand. Some of the language that was said there, the coin toss, it was just not right.
Tillman to make the toss as the visitor. It's a head, and it's a tail.
It was very, very, very rated X. The TV cameras picked that up.
And I was in the press box watching, I'm going, that's unbelievable. We are going to take a shellacking for that.
Jerome and Lazo, those guys, they really did shock America.
If I can intimidate you and get in your head before we even kick the ball off, I won that battle.
Miami, you have your choice of keep receiving or defending the goal. You will receive. They are going to receive.
We didn't care. You know what? We didn't even have to toss a coin because we're going to give you the ball. You can have the ball. We're going to let our defense come out and smack you in the mouth, and then we'll let the offense take over from there.
Bosworth and his friends cannot blow the house down. Instead, it is Vinny Testaverde. Middle, touchdown, Hurricanes, Irvin. Bosworth can't believe
high-fived, we finger-pointed, and we talked trash.
We were the Alis of that era. Not only we're gonna beat you up, we're gonna talk to you while we're beating you up.
Some pushing and shoving on the far side. Breaks out. Now both teams rush over there. Oh, I hate to see this. It is a shame to see it.
Well, they said it was a shame. That's Brent Musburger. Was it a shame, or were you having something to do with all that?
Well, you have to look at the background. First of all, on Saturday morning before that ball game, there was a half-page picture of Brian Bosworth. Now, you remember the Boz, and Boz was talking trash about all the things Oklahoma was going to do to our team.
Mm-hmm.
So that riled our guys up. Now, our guys, as you know, we didn't back down from anybody. And so when Bosworth is on the half page of our newspaper, saying what he's going to do, before the pregame meal, Melvin Bratton, Alonzo Highsmith, and all that crew, they called Bosworth. They were staying over at the Fountain Blue, and they had the gal downstairs who they knew, allowed them to go and call into their rooms. They called Bosworth. They told him what we were going to do that day. And then next thing you know, Alonzo and them, they called Jamel Holloway, the quarterback, told him what we were going to do. And we actually, they come running to me in pregame meal, and they said, Coach, we called Bosworth, we called Holloway. We told them we're going to kick their ass. And I said, okay, let's go do it.
So did you have any gripe when the referees came up to you and said, we're going to throw a flag, Jim, if they don't shake hands? Did you say, guys, you got to shake hands?
Hey, throw the flag, we'll overcome that penalty. But they weren't going to shake hands with the guy that had been talking trash in our newspaper about what he was going to do to us.
I'm going to take you through 5 players. Now, there were so many great players you had. It's hard to pick them all, obviously. Let's start with Vinny Testaverde, paragraph.
When I first met Vinny, he was a backup to Bernie Kosar. And Vinny walked in my office when I first got the Miami job, and I said, geez, who is it? He looked like a huge tight end. And then I get out on the field, and I see him move around and throw the football on and on. He fit right into our system. He could throw the football. He had great talent. Was a great competitor. It's unfortunate. He finished his career. He got injured, riding a motor scooter before our last regular season game. He missed a lot of work going to the Heisman Trophy and the Walter Camp and on and on. So he didn't practice for about 2 or 3 weeks there. And then we played Penn State.
Well, save that, because I'm going to talk about Penn State in a moment. But is he the best quarterback in college that you'd ever coached?
Vinny was the best quarterback in our group with our group of players. Mm-hmm. Bernie Kosar was probably a more impromptu, make plays without the talent around him. But with the talent we had around Vinny, he was a great quarterback. But it's hard for me to compare. Steve Walsh was the best quarterback I had as far as not making mistakes. Mm-hmm. But he didn't have anywhere near the talent as these other quarterbacks.
Michael Irvin.
Michael was a great competitor, would work his rear end off. I could cuss him like a sailor and he'd work that much harder. I kind of put my arm around him and kind of adopted him, from day one. He came from a huge family with, tough situation.
17 kids, right?
And he was something. I had him in my office. He got in a fight with a senior offensive guard. And I said, what in the world are you getting in a fight with a 260-pound senior offensive lineman, Michael? He said, well, we were in line to get food at the chow hall. He was just a freshman. He said, and he said, Mike jumped in front of me, he broke in line. He said, so I started fighting. He said, I've been fighting for chicken all my life. I wasn't going to let him get my meal.
That's unbelievable. Russell Maryland, this is a guy you're really proud of. You also got him in Dallas. He graduated early, academic scholar, Outland Trophy winner. Tell me about the force that Russell Maryland was.
Well, Hubbard Alexander, brought the tape down of Russell, and Russell was over 300 pounds, but he was a great, great student, very smart, worked his rear end off. And so we took a chance on Russell, because he wasn't recruited. But he lost the weight and he worked himself into being a great player. Ended up, we took him in Dallas and, he made a couple of Pro Bowls and helped us win some Super Bowls.
Alonzo Highsmith, he told me that his father told you that the reason that you weren't accepted at Miami at first was they were afraid you were going to bring too many black players in. Is that true?
Yeah, I was on the sideline. Walter Highsmith, who was a high school coach at that time, Alonzo's dad. Later on, Walter went to Texas Southern. He actually coached Michael Strahan, but Walter told me, he said, Coach, he said, these people here, I don't know that they're going to like you recruiting a lot of black players. And I said, hey, I'm a recruit good football players. I don't care what color they are. If they're a great football player, I'm going to bring them to Miami. And he said, they're going to be concerned about that because when you were at Oklahoma State, that's what you did.
Heart and soul of your defense, I think, was Jerome. Tell the folks about the late, great Jerome Brown.
Jerome was a great, great football player, great talent, kind of a free spirit. I remember we went to play Oklahoma up in Norman. And, I'd kind of had my ears beat back by Oklahoma when I was at Oklahoma State. I knew how talented Oklahoma was. And so it was our first meeting. And Jerome was there stretching, and the Oklahoma players started walking down the ramp to go to the field in the pregame warmups. And Jerome started chanting, fresh meat, fresh meat. I said, Jerome, calm down. These guys are pretty good.
Fresh meat. Wow. Okay, we're going to talk about some things now that aren't going to be thrilling for you to talk about, maybe not your favorite subject. But in Doug Flutie's November 23rd, 1984, last-ditch pass, we're going to roll it now. This beats the Canes and broke your heart. Take us through it, and we're going to also look on a replay of it again. Maybe you could recoach it again. This is just an unbelievable pass.
Well, this was a crazy one. Yeah, as I said earlier on, the coaching staff, there was a lot of tension there. And my defensive coordinator had cleaned out his offense the day before this game. But he was still coaching the game. And, we had just scored. Melvin Bratton had just gone over the top to take the lead against Boston College. And I'm on the headphones. And I called the defensive coordinator and say, hey, well, let's run prevent. Let's make sure we get outside containment. And I didn't get any response. I said, well, and so I asked one of the other coaches, I said, hey, where's our defensive coordinator? They said, he's already gone down the elevator. He unpacked his office yesterday and he resigned. And like I said, I had a difficult time with that staff that first year, but I ended up coaching the bowl game after that pass, after that game, without the trainer, without the strength coach, without the quarterback coach, without the offensive line coach, without the receiver coach. Wow. With half a staff. I mean, it was a trying year because of the situation, but we straightened it out after the bowl game.
I would say so. You go 52-9 overall, 5 New Year's Day bowl games. But I want to rerun this clip, and I want you to redefense the play. If you could do it all over again, what would you do? Take us through this.
We would have better containment. We'd have had a better defense. Our defensive backs underplayed the football. They undercut it. Rather than trying to knock it down. But we were in disarray on this play. We were in disarray for that particular drive. Here we undercut it right there rather than trying to just knock the pass down.
Was that at that point the hardest defeat in your career at that point?
Well, at that point, but I had another one coming here a few years later.
We're going to talk about it right now.
But I could understand that situation. Those last couple of games at Miami and the bowl game, we were just trying to fight through it and get through the season and straighten out the staff, so that we could go and win some games.
You guys lost a game that you were up 31-0 to Maryland, and people wanted your scalp. They wanted the scars to continue in your hair, I think. But you go to the Fiesta Bowl. some people say it should have been Orlando, or it was more of a home game, but you're in Arizona. The kids come off I say kids, they're young men, come off the plane in camouflage gear, and everybody remembers this moment. Tell us about it.
Well, you know, if you think back, Roy, during that period of time, you know, wearing camouflage, you know, was kind of a trend in college. A lot of the college students wore camouflage. And because we had lost, you know, the national championship the year before, you know, against Tennessee there in the Sugar Bowl, you know, our team all year long had said, we're on a mission. We're on a mission. And we went through the season undefeated, 11-0, and beat up some great teams. And so that was their thought process. We're on a mission. Actually, I wasn't even on that plane. I was at a charity event with Bob Hope, and somebody called me and said, "Hey, Coach, your players just got off the plane, you know, and they had, you know, fatigues on." I said, "Oh, okay. You know, so what's the big deal?" You know, that was their thought.
If you knew that in advance, would you have stopped them from wearing that stuff?
No, that was their. They wanted to say, "Hey, we're on a mission. We're on a mission to win the national championship."
And you had made comments about Joe Paterno at the time, calling him Saint Joe. You were egging them on a little bit. I want to show though the interception, the last one, 5 interceptions for Vinny against Penn State, and the overall. We'll roll it here. The overall attitude was, "Hey, the good guys won, the bad guys lost." Talk about it.
Well, again, that was a tough situation. Benny missed about 3 weeks of practice because of the motor scooter accident, you know, traveling for the Walter Camp, traveling for the Heisman Trophy. And so really wasn't prepared. And, we outgained like 450 yards to about 150. I mean, we turned the ball over, though. It's probably the worst game that I've ever coached in my life. It was the most difficult, loss I've ever had in my life. It was a game that we were a better team, but we weren't better that night. And had we done things differently, we should have won that ball game, but we didn't. You can't change it.
In view of what happened with Joe many, 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 many years later, do you think in some ways that he should have had more control over his football program? Obviously, he was aware of the incident with Sandusky. What would you say to Joe if you were alive? Would you be supportive of him? Would you be critical of him? What?
Yeah, I don't know the situation. I wasn't there. I don't know all the facts and the details. And so I wouldn't have any advice at all. Everything I knew about Joe Paterno, he was a great man and a great coach. But as far as that situation with Sandusky, again, I don't know all the facts.
Tad Foote, he passed away a few years ago. I wouldn't want to denigrate his memory, but you did have headbutts with him. You had head-to-head issues with him. He had an extension set up for you at University of Miami. And after the Penn State, I'll call it the word debacle, because you lost, although it was a very close game. He thought they were out of control. He was pissed. He wanted an apology from you. And you didn't want any part of it, to a point where, this is what I hear, you made up your mind when he did that to you, you didn't want to come back. True?
Yeah, I had a meeting. I'd coached the Japan Bowl after we played Penn State. And Nick Kristen, my attorney, called and said, "Boy, they're giving you all kinds of, grief around here." I said, "Well, we lost the game, but we went through the regular season undefeated, had a great football team." And he said, "The president wants to meet with you when you get back." So I went and met with President Tad Foote, and he had said publicly at a alumni meeting that there was an extension in my contract because they thought I was going to go to Southern Cal and coach at Southern Cal. So everybody, "Hey, Jimmy's staying." This was before the bowl game. And so anyway, he asked me to apologize publicly, and I said, "Okay, I'll apologize publicly," even though I didn't feel good about it, because I didn't feel like we'd done anything wrong. They said something about like even the steak fry that our players walked out on. Well, Joe Paterno didn't even attend that steak fry.
By the way, just so I can put in context, the steak fry was a pre-game dinner between both teams. Penn State players made some jokes that Jerome Brown, for example, thought was racist, and they were angry, and that's why they got fired up.
Well, Roy, you tell me if it's racist. Their punter said, well, we even let our black players sit down and have lunch with us. You know, well, Jerome Brown didn't like that. But anyway, so after the steak fry, we left, and everybody said, hey, you walked out of a steak fry. I said, all of their players didn't even go to the steak fry. Joe Paterno didn't go to the steak fry. So why are you getting upset at me for walking out? But anyway, Tad Foote said he wanted me to apologize. I said, okay, I'll apologize. And then as I'm walking out of his office, I said, by the way, you know, President Foote, what about the extension on my contract that you talked about? He said, oh, we can't do that now.
Oh, boy.
Not with all that's happened. And I can't say publicly the words that I used, what I told him. But
go ahead. Go ahead.
I told him exactly what I thought, and I slammed the door, and I told Sam Jankovic, I said, settle this damn contract. I'm out of here.
Wow.
And so Sam, you know, he said, settle down. So we redid a contract, and they took my buyout clause out to where I could leave whenever I wanted to leave.
And you did?
I left after the next year.
By the way, within 5 points of 2 other national titles, people forget that too. You know, you guys were pretty well oiled. You were a pretty good machine. He was a big part of that machine. Jimmy Johnson coached 1 national title team at Miami, but it could have easily been 2 or 3 more. In part 2 of our interview, Jimmy talks about learning he was a Hall of Famer live on national television, and Troy Aikman joins us for that. Plus, Jimmy will talk about the toll that coaching took on his family, his regrets. His son, one of his sons, is a recovering alcoholic. Jimmy also talks about the road ahead for Mario Cristobal and why he thinks the Canes are definitely coming back to elite status. That and so much more on part 2 of our show with Jimmy Johnson. This is GOATS, the greatest Miami Hurricanes of all time. I'm Roy Firestone. We'll see you next time. I'm Roy Firestone, and this is GOATS, the greatest Miami Hurricanes of all time. This is part 2 of our first episode in this brand new series on Cane Sport. Jimmy Johnson, the legendary coach and Hall of Famer, talks about learning he was selected for the Hall of Fame on live national television. He's very honest, too, talking about his regrets. One of his sons is a recovering alcoholic. Jimmy partially blames himself for that. Plus his insights into the new era for Canes football, Mario Cristobal, the NIL effect, and he even talks about dressing up as a woman. Here's Jimmy talking about his years as the head coach of the Miami Hurricanes. I'm going to roll a montage of you at Miami, and I want you to reflect and look at some of these pictures, and maybe a little sentimental, I suppose, because I don't think Miami will ever be out of your heart. I think it's always going to be in your soul. So we'll roll this and reflect on what Miami meant to you.
Well, that's the bowl game after the Penn State bowl game. And so that was redemption. I love walking out on that field. I love going through the smoke. I love those players. I used to say the most fun time my entire life was at University of Miami. And maybe the most fun time of my life is right now. But as far as coaching, I had a ball. I love University of Miami. I love those players.
So there you are again on the shoulders of those players back in that era. And again, there's another shot of it. And you ended up being in the Miami Hall of Fame. No surprise there. But there you are with Michael. But what did it mean to more or less be viewed as the coach? Really, I mean, Dennis Erickson won 2 titles, but you were the coach. You're the Hall of Famer. It must have felt like when you left, maybe not bittersweet, but you look back now, maybe sentimentally, I suppose.
There's a couple of things that I'm really proud of. First of all, the team that we took over, we had to replace 9 defensive starters, So, it wasn't just a walk into a ready-made football team, even though they were very good, especially offensively. But the thing that I'm most proud of, Roy, is when I got there, the graduation rate for the football players was right about 51%. And that was pretty close to what the student body was. And I put in mandatory study hall, mandatory class attendance. I'd have my coaches go to the classes to make sure our players were in the class. If they weren't in the class, we'd run them at 6 o'clock in the morning. I got academic counselors. I got all kinds of tutoring for them. Our graduation rate when I left was approaching 90%, right at 88% graduation rate for our players. And it stayed there ever since I've been there with all the support system that we installed at that time. So winning a national championship and winning all those games, one thing, but I took a bunch of inner city kids and they got their diplomas. That's what I'm proud of.
Mm. You know, by the way, we mentioned this before. Russell Maryland got a business degree in 3 years. All right. And Michael Irvin graduated as well at a high level as well. As you mentioned, almost 90%. And Michael Irvin was always viewed as kind of a renegade kid. And he was focused when he had to be focused, even academically, he would get down with it, right?
Well, making those guys go to summer school every summer, they got their diplomas early and even got a doctor, Dr. Claude Jones, you know. So, you know, we had some pretty good students. They weren't all rogues.
You go to Dallas, and of course, we've won in 15, which we'll talk about in a few seconds. But we're not going to focus too much on the Cowboy years because this is a Miami story. But I did talk to Troy last week, and I know you saw him last weekend, and we have great shots of the two of you guys. But he said something that was really interesting when I said, what do you admire most about Coach? And here's what he said.
I think what I've admired about Jimmy is at a relatively young age, he knew what made him happy. And it wasn't about money. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about celebrity. It was none of those things, because he could have made a lot more money being a GM for any number of teams in the National Football League. But what made him happy was fishing and living there in South Florida, in the Florida Keys. But he's not the same guy that I played for. He was a very complicated, driven individual, maniacal in his desire to win and prove, because at that time, a college coach hadn't enjoyed success in the NFL. And he was determined to show that he could do it and prove that he could do it. And he did.
Thoughts?
Well, you know, Troy was down here with a bunch of my coaches here just a few days ago. And Troy said, you know, really, he asked Tony Wise, my offensive line coach, he said, you know, what's the best thing about Jimmy? What can you say? And, you know, Tony said his whatever. And then Troy looked at me. I said, you know, I think I tried to bring the best out of everybody. Mm-hmm. You know, every player, every assistant coach. You know, a lot of my assistant coaches, you know, they came up through the ranks. A couple of them were high school coaches. You know, some of them, you know, had never coached in college before. Some of them never, when I brought them to the pros, they had never coached in pros before. Of course, I'd never coached in pros before. A lot of those players were not highly recruited players. I tried to bring out the best in everybody in our organization. And I think that's what made us good.
Didn't you have a quote, treat a player the way he wants to be instead of the way something like that? How does it go?
Treat a person as he is, and he will stay as he is. Treat a person as if he were what he could be and should be. He will become what he could be and should be. It's the Pygmalion effect.
It's almost John Wooden-like.
Hey, it's a positive reinforcement, and putting the psychology, the self-fulfilling prophecy, the psychology of expectations with those players. No different than me telling the players, hey, you know, you can put it in 3-inch headlines. You know, we're going to win the game. You know, putting the expectation on those players, and actually, you know, Roy, I really had never had dreams. You know, I think if you have dreams, you kind of hope. You got your fingers crossed. You hope something happens for you. I really believed things were going to happen. And when you believe things are going to happen, it's part of your personality. You work to make sure it does happen. You're not sitting back hoping that it happens. You work to make sure it happens.
I'm not sure, though, you could have ever dreamed this moment we're about to show you. Though, even though you had the credentials, by the way, one of only 3 coaches who won national championship in college and a Super Bowl, but you're the only coach who won 2 Super Bowls and a national title. And this was the moment with David Baker 2 years ago that's probably going to give you emotion even right now. Watch.
It's my great honor to tell you that you're going to be the 328th Hall of Famer into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I
your legacy is going to be in Canton, Ohio forever. Congratulations, Coach.
All of a sudden, cut to the live shot at the game, and you could see the tears coming down Troy's face.
Awesome.
What was special about this one was not just that it was on national TV, but that there were other guys there that could feel that they were a part of it. I think the surprise worked exactly like we'd hoped it would, maybe better than we'd hoped it would.
This is so special to me because when you put in the work that we put in, it's nice to know people appreciate it.
Love you, JJ.
Love you.
Amen to that, brother. Love you.
Still get chills? Still?
Yeah, I just feel good for all the assistant coaches and all the great players. I didn't win those games. The players and the coaches won those games. And I was fortunate to be around good people. But as I said before, I tried to bring out the best in those people. And proud that, hey, there's only 3 coaches, by the way, that's in the College Football Hall of Fame and the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And there's only 1 person in the College Football Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Broadcasting Hall of Fame.
You got the 3 rings.
3 rings.
There's your 3 rings. David Hyde's writing this book here, Swagger. And we had him on last week talking about you. And similarly to what Aikman said, but a slight difference was that it was about the mountaintop, getting to the mountaintop and then looking around and saying, maybe this isn't exactly what I thought it would be. Watch and listen to what he said.
Once he got to the top of the mountain and had been there a couple years, he looked around and he saw that he really didn't like the person he had to be at the top. He didn't feel that was him. It was too, again, a dictator pushing people all the time. And he couldn't kick back and relax and have fun. And that's who he feels is his real personality. And the only way to be that person was to get out of coaching. So it's a story of the guy who got to the top of the mountain and realized he wasn't happy. And, he had the strength and the awareness, self-awareness to say, I'm going to get off the merry-go-round.
You have gratitude. You're a very grateful man. But you have some regrets, and you uttered some of those regrets at the Hall of Fame. And I want to show the quote that you said. You said, I look back, and maybe if I'd been at home rather than trying to win a football game, maybe he, and you're talking about Chad, who had alcohol problems, maybe he wouldn't have had those problems. I don't know. But I do know me not being home didn't help. We have a couple of shots, by the way, of your boys. You're very proud. You're very close and very proud and have been for many, many years. But there was an estrangement for a period of time. Reflect on that, on your own quote.
Well, Roy, I was so driven trying to win games, that I wasn't home a lot. And there were sacrifices and there were struggles. As you said, Chad had alcohol problems. By the way, he's doing fantastic now.
And isn't he as an officer now for substance abuse, right?
He has 2 facilities, Tranquil Shores, very successful in St. Petersburg, and then he's got Cedar Ranch opening up right outside of Austin.
Great.
So, sober for 10, 15 years and, doing great. Brent's doing great. My relationship with them's never better. But it hit me when I was coaching the Dolphins. My mother passed away, and I went to the funeral.
Well, let's show the shot of your folks, CW and your other. I think it's Aline.
Yeah.
Was your mom Aline? Aline.
Yeah. CW
those people were so important to you in your life.
Oh, but mother passed away, and so Wayne Huizinga, the owner of the Dolphins, let me use his plane. I flew to the funeral. And I saw her laying in the casket, and I just started asking myself, what am I doing? Both my sons played football. I never saw them play a game. One was struggling with alcohol. And I said, I went through a divorce. I said, maybe it's time for me to spend time with my family. And that's when I realized I needed to walk away from coaching. And it's, It strengthened my bond with my family, with my two sons, my wife Rhonda now, and I'm happier now than I've ever been in my entire life.
But you wouldn't do it differently, though, Jimmy, would you?
No.
All of this came because of football.
Oh, and my sons understand that. Brent's, one of the smartest guys I've ever known. He's a National Merit Scholar, and had the highest grade point average of any football player at University of Texas 4 years running. And so, pretty smart guy.
Mm.
And he said, Daddy, he says, hey, we understand. We understand what you sacrificed. And we understand that we wouldn't benefit all these things if you hadn't sacrificed, if you hadn't put in that work. So they understand, but hey, it wasn't easy. I mean, it was a difficult period of time. And fortunately, I left the game in time, to bond with my sons and bond with my wife and strengthen my family. Had I stayed in coaching, I don't know that would have ever happened.
And all of those people were at that Hall of Fame, man. When you looked into that audience, you must have got choked up. See those boys and see Troy and see all your players and see Rhonda. It must have been absolutely unbelievable for you.
I was scared to death. I was just going to break down and start crying just looking at them, And I fought through it 2 or 3 times. But I mean,
it was a great speech. Great speech. It was a great speech.
I even mentioned, Brent and Chad's mother, Linda Kay. She was a great mother, and raised them because I wasn't there. I've been fortunate to be around some great people.
You told me many years ago when you got fired in Dallas, the hardest thing, in fact, you
when
said—
I settled the contract in Dallas.
Oh, okay. All right.
He says fired.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair.
If he'd have fired me, he'd have had to pay me for 5 years.
Okay. But we'll talk about Jerry at the very end. But I remember asking you a question. When's the last time you cried? And at the time, and you said, I cried when I had to tell my father that I was no longer the coach of the Cowboys. And he said, it's going to be all right, son. And you said, and it was all right.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember telling you that. He knocked on my door after I'd had the press conference that, I was leaving Dallas, and it was, knocked on the door, opened the front door because he wasn't at the press conference, and he showed up in time. And that's when I told him, it was not easy, for me to walk away from Dallas, but I knew that it was the best thing for me because, one thing I've always done, whether or not, Dallas or Miami or leaving the Dolphins or whatever, is I was going to do things that make me and my family happy. And that was the most important thing. If you're not happy doing what you're doing, you need to move on and do something else.
Yeah, we talked about Chad and Brent as brothers, and there were 2 other brothers that we will now shift gears and talk about. That's Roy Cristobal and Mario Cristobal. There they are together. Now, Lewis was a regular on your team. I think Mario, am I right? He was a freshman?
Freshman, right.
The very end. Those brothers are pretty tight too. And I'm going to ask you a little bit about Mario because this is a new time. I know you love him. I know you believe in him. Let's talk about Mario Cristobal for a few moments, and then we're going to talk about the job ahead.
Well, I think the biggest thing with Mario is he's been in a big program. He's been on the big stage. He knows what it takes. And fortunately, with the alumni, for the first time that I can ever remember, and for the first time it's ever happened, the alumni have stepped in and are donating money to make sure it's big time football. For years, we were able to win games because we were in a great city that could attract talent. But we didn't have facilities. We didn't have money. We didn't have, we couldn't pay assistant coaches. And so now there's been an influx of money where he's got an outstanding coaching staff.
He's got maybe the best coaching staff since Jimmy Johnson.
Without question.
Honest to God.
My guys were unproven. His guys are proven.
Right. And let me show you. We'll show some pictures of Mario. Tell me about the job ahead for this guy with all the pressures and expectation.
Well, you said the word expectations. There's expectations that, hey, he's coming home, and we're going to all of a sudden, day one, be back where we were. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be as easy as that. The other thing, we were an independent. We played a national schedule. We were on national television. Now every game's televised.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, where there's a national game and then a couple of regional games. Well, we were, because of being an independent and because of our schedule, every other week we were either playing Michigan or Penn State or Florida
Right.
State or Oklahoma or Notre Dame. And so our schedule was such that we were on national television every other week, and we were beating those teams. So we were able to attract, really, great talent.
Right.
And so it's not the same situation, but I think with Cristobal and with the staff and with the way they're going about things, they can win that division and that conference. And so they can take some steps going back to where we were.
I'll tell you what else has changed, and you know this. Name, image, likeness. You can now pay players, business people can, not conglomerates, which is a violation, but individual, if you do work, you can pay players hundreds of thousands, maybe millions eventually of dollars to play college football. You don't believe in NIL. I don't think. That's what Dave Hyde told me. You don't believe in it.
Well, I think it's going to cause some problems, but the NIL, with John and Alex Ruiz, who I've talked to on a couple of different occasions. In fact, John's put me on the board, advisory board for the new stadium, et cetera. They are doing things as far as bringing in players, and players are able to participate with the NIL, and so they're getting money. But this is no different. I know. I've talked to people. Alabama's doing it. USC's doing it with a lot of their players. All the big programs around the country, they're involved with the NIL. Now, where it's going to hurt is some of the smaller schools that don't have wealthy alumni, and they're not going to go out and pay $5-10 million a year. So it all of a sudden, the good and the great, they get better, and the has-beens, they're going to be at the bottom. So there's going to be a big separation.
What I'm concerned about, Coach, is the day that an offensive line says, hey, we're not getting enough money, we'll all threaten to go to the portal. By the way, one of the basketball players at Miami already did something like that. And then you're going to have sort of a class action, not suit, right, but a kind of extortion. It could happen, Coach. We could see that. That's
why I'm saying I'm not for it, and it's what your competition is doing. But one thing that I talked to Mario about is, hey, one of the biggest, chores you've got as a head coach is you've got to continually recruit your own players to keep them happy and to keep them there and to keep them out of the transfer portal. The only thing, my advice I gave to him, though, as long as you recruit top class individuals that are self-motivated, that want to get an education, that are driven to be successful right there, they're not going to be apt to say, I'm going to quit and go somewhere else. And so as long as you recruit the right kind of guy, you won't have as many problems.
Alonzo Highsmith told me on the phone recently, or actually texting, he said, you know what? Why not make it like this? Everyone gets $150,000 upon graduation. If you go and you leave the portal, you lose the money. Is that a solution?
I don't know if it's a solution. It would probably help. I'm not really excited about the NIL. I'm not really excited about the transfer portal. I think it makes it a difficult job on the coach. It's hard to coach some of these guys and be hard on them and drive them to a point to where they didn't want to be, and them not get upset, oh, I'm going to go somewhere else. Or if I'm a third teamer, you're trying to convince him, say, hey, keep working. You're going to work your way up the lineup. I'm going to go somewhere else where I can play.
I was going to say, it's like being married and then seeing a hot looking girl across the street and getting a divorce and dumping the wife for a better looking girl. Some of these kids are losing scholarships they're dumping them off the team because they see somebody on the portal they like. And those kids who left can't get a scholarship somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. You're the one that told the story, not me.
I mean, but it's true. I mean,
I
really,
I understand. It's difficult.
Only a few more minutes, and you've been fantastic. I hope you're enjoying this. This has been so much. It's terrific.
Great memories.
Yes, great memories. What attracts you most in a recruit? Is it speed? Because Alonso said it's speed, speed, speed with Jimmy.
Well, that's one part of it. I bet you I've had 50 coaches, general managers, owners. You know, Dean Spanos, the Chargers. He's been down here 3 times. You know, I had Tom Benson down here, Cal McNair. You know, Bob McNair. You know, Belichick comes down. You know, every year. And they said, well, what do you look for in talent? And I said, well, you know, we can all see if they can play. But there's 5 things that I want to look at. And it's going to be a red flag or something. I said, number 1 is intelligence. You look at my first draft at Dallas, Troy Aikman, Daryl Johnston, Mark Stebnowski, Tony Tolbert, all 4 academic All-Americans. You know, and so intelligence, you know, if it's a smart player, he's going to continually get better. You know, next thing I want is a gym rat. I want somebody that's going to work his rear end off. You know, a gym rat like Michael Irvin, he's going to compete in anything he's doing. And if he's not practicing football, he's going to be out shooting baskets or something. You know, the other thing is I wanted a playmaker. And a playmaker doesn't necessarily be a guy that touches the ball. Russell Maryland was a playmaker. You know, playmaker. And then I wanted speed and quickness. And the last thing was character. I said, because you can't win a championship with bums. But those are the 5 things that I looked at, Roy.
You go to Canton 2 years ago for the Hall of Fame, and Troy gives you the bust, which was an emotional moment. But also on that stage is Jerry Jones. And my question to you was it a little weird to have Jerry with this arm around you?
Not really. I mean, Jerry has probably helped the NFL financially more than any owner ever.
Yeah, but I'm talking about you, Jimmy. I'm talking about you now.
Oh, about me.
You know what I'm saying? Was it weird is he taking a little bit of credit up there with you? Was it a little bit of an ego thing for him? Come on.
No, he should. You know, he wrote the checks, and so he should take a little bit of credit. It doesn't bother me. You have success. There's glory for everybody.
Very nicely said. I got a weird picture that I want to show you before we go.
Okay.
What is this picture right here?
Oh, boy. Well,
Coach, I don't know what this is. You got to help me out.
A Halloween costume.
Okay.
You know, we used to go out on Halloween, a bunch of adults back when I was at Iowa State. And we'd go, you know, we'd wait till all the kids were in bed and the adults would go and we would dress up and we'd go to different people's houses and, you know, we'd have a couple of toddies and say, okay, you know, get you an outfit and let's go, you know, and we'd go to the next house. We'd just go to one friend's house to another.
I can't say that you're a fine looking woman though. I got to tell you.
A little chunky.
A little chunky. Before we go, I want you to hear what Troy said about how much he owes you in his career and his life through the friendship. Watch.
Jimmy, you've been an amazing friend, an amazing coach. I've told you this so many times in the past that whatever I've accomplished and all the dreams that I was able to fulfill as a player are because of your leadership and what you meant to those teams. And I speak for all of my teammates when I say that we thank you. Wish you had stayed longer, but you taught us a lot. You taught us more than you'll ever know. And even in the tough times, you still brought a lot of laughs to all of us when we get together and talk about some of the things that happened behind the scenes. But thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you've meant to me and all you've meant to my teammates.
Well, you had a lot to do with him getting to the Hall of Fame. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, he was going to get there regardless, you know, who coached him. But I mean, that was my role, is to bring out the best in everybody. All of them didn't go in the Hall of Fame. But I tried to get the best out of every individual that I came in contact with.
A couple more things just to tie it in, and we'll wrap it up. When you took the job in Miami with the Dolphins, some people thought you kind of slighted Don Shula, saying, I don't care about the past, I only care about the present. Something similar maybe with Tom Landry in Dallas. Clear that up for us. Do you think that you could rethink how you would say it now because these were legends?
Yeah. I didn't want to, take anything away from the success of Don and Tom or anybody that I ever followed. And I probably could have said it better. Actually, this all came about at a banquet where we had like 4 free agents that had gone to other teams, got awards. Brian Cox, Troy Vincent, another couple, players. But anyway, they had signed contracts with other teams and they got awards. And so it really wasn't anything at Don. I said, I don't want to, really dwell on the past. That's the past. Let's look forward. Let's look like what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And I probably didn't respect or show my respect, for the past like I should have. Because mm-hmm. Tom Landry was a great football coach, but he had 3 straight losing seasons. And when I took over the job, they were 3-13, worst in the NFL. And so there was a reason why I was there. I didn't want to take anything away from those great coaches. I just wanted people to judge me for what I did.
Mm-hmm. Was it icy for you and Don Shula at the end?
Yeah, not really. We never even really saw each other.
Wow.
One time he cussed me out because I didn't keep Troy Vincent. And I said, I couldn't keep Troy Vincent. You'd spend all the money and we didn't have any cap money. We were $5 million over the cap. So I couldn't keep it. And so, yeah, we really didn't have much of a relationship.
We're out of time, but the last question I want to ask you is, why does Miami matter? Why does South Florida matter so much to you? You live down there, you love it, but you also love the school. You still love to talk to the kids. Why did it matter to you?
I love, it was such a fun time for me. It was such a successful time for me. It set the stage for me to go on and do what I did when I left Miami. I love those players. I love the university for what they did for us. Obviously, I love living in South Florida. I love being on the water. We did scuba diving and fishing and play. Hey, it's a fantastic place, or else I wouldn't have 30 or 40 coaches coming down here every couple of years to spend time with me on my boat. It's a great place to live, and it gives me the greatest memory of all time. I never could replace what I got there at Miami.
Beautifully said, Coach. The name of the book is Swagger. You're going to see it in November. I think it's on the news. It's going to be on the bookstores or Amazon. I think the second week in November, I want to say.
Yeah, they're pre-ordering it now with Simon Schuster.
Fantastic. Your story, it should be a movie, Coach. It really should. And I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for doing this show with us. It's the first of many, many, many we're going to be doing with legends at Miami. And there's no bigger legend than you.
Roy, I appreciate it. It's been fun talking with you.
You're a good man. Thanks, Coach.
All right, Roy.
Jimmy Johnson, the legendary coach, first the Miami Hurricanes and later with the Dallas Cowboys. We thank you for joining us, and the name of his book, of course, is Swagger. It'll be coming out in the fall. We will see you next time when we have some of the upcoming guests, including Mario Cristobal, Jim Kelly, Mark Richt, Chuck Foreman, and so much more. This is GOATS. We'll see you next time.